Cadillac's arrival in Formula One feels like the moment American motorsport fans have been waiting for. Finally, a major US manufacturer is stepping into the world's most demanding racing series with real ambition, real funding, and real intent. They've committed veterans like Sergio Pérez and Valtteri Bottas, laid down a financial investment the FIA couldn't ignore, and reignited hope that an American team can succeed on merit, not just branding. But behind the optimism lies a more uncomfortable truth. Formula One isn't NASCAR, IndyCar, or IMSA. It's a sport where experience compounds over decades, where microscopic details decide championships, and where new teams face a learning curve so steep it borders on a cliff. Ambition gets you in the door. But in Formula One, ambition is only step one. So today, we're unpacking Cadillac's real weaknesses. Not to tear them down, but because if they want to survive in this sport and eventually win, they'll have to confront challenges far larger than any press release will ever admit. To understand Cadillac's uphill battle, you first need to understand the financial reality of Formula One. A reality so extreme, it makes every other form of motorsport budgeting look like pocket change. Even with cost caps, the top teams still burn through hundreds of millions of dollars every year. Not just on engines and chassis, but on simulation tools, wind tunnel programs, software development, logistics networks, factory expansions, and the army of specialists required to keep a modern F1 car evolving from race to race. Cadillac knows this on paper. They've seen the numbers, and General Motors isn't exactly new to massive R&D projects. But Formula One has a long memory, and this isn't the sport's first experience with large manufacturers arriving with excitement, promising long-term commitment, and then quietly heading for the exit when the balance sheet turns unfriendly. Toyota spent billions without a win. BMW stepped away during the financial crisis. Honda joined, left, returned, left again, and only later realized they had abandoned a championship-winning engine. The skepticism Cadillac faces isn't personal. It's the result of a paddock that has been burned before. This is Cadillac's first major test. Not the size of their budget, but the depth of their resolve. Formula One demands a level of patience that few corporations are built for. The early years will likely be full of expensive lessons and quiet frustrations. That's normal. Every successful manufacturer in modern F1 suffered years before tasting consistent success. The question hanging over Cadillac isn't whether they have money today, but whether they'll still have the appetite to keep spending when the results take longer than expected. And yet, this is where optimism is justified. GM is one of the few companies entering Formula One with the resources, the scale, and the engineering backbone to actually weather that early storm. They don't need F1 to boost their brand. They chose F1 because they believe they can contribute something meaningful to it. Commitment in Formula One isn't about one big investment. It's about showing up every year and deciding the fight is still worth it. If Cadillac does that, they have a real shot at becoming the American success story fans have been waiting for. Cadillac's financial commitment is one test, but the technical landscape of 2026 may be even tougher. They're entering Formula One right as the rulebook gets rewritten from the ground up. The new regulations push power units to nearly 50% electric, eliminate the MGUH, ramp up the MGUK, mandate fully sustainable fuels, and shrink the cars while adding active aerodynamics. It's a seismic shift, even for teams that have spent years refining the current formula. That's the difficult part, but this is worth highlighting. Cadillac isn't walking into this blind. GM is not new to high-level electric engineering. In fact, it's one of the few manufacturers entering 2026 with large-scale EV experience. Battery systems, power deployment strategies, thermal management, and software integration are all areas where GM already has deep institutional knowledge. Translating that into F1 won't be easy, but it gives Cadillac a foundation most new teams never have. Still, the hybrid-era expertise of Mercedes, Ferrari, Renault, and Red Bull powertrains is a serious hurdle. Those manufacturers have spent a decade learning how hybrid deployment works over a race distance, how battery strategies evolve lap to lap, and how to balance combustion and electric power under extreme load. Cadillac must learn those lessons at a faster pace than anyone before them. On the chassis side, the challenge is similar. The 2026 cars will be smaller, more reactive, and heavily reliant on active aero to compensate for reduced downforce. It's a new dance between aerodynamics, battery usage, and engine behavior, one that even the established teams are still trying to map out. Cadillac's first chassis won't be perfect, no newcomers is, but refinement is part of the process. Every team in Formula One gets better by learning what didn't work and iterating until it does. Here's where Cadillac has a quiet advantage: their drivers. Signing Pérez and Bottas wasn't just about experience, it was about feedback quality. Both drivers have spent their careers working inside elite engineering organizations. They've driven title-contending machines, lived through regulation changes, and know how to translate on-track behavior into actionable development insights. New teams often struggle because their drivers don't know what good feels like. Cadillac won't have that problem. And of course, recruiting top engineers remains a challenge. The people who already understand 2026 development cycles work at teams Cadillac wants to beat, and convincing them to switch projects requires long-term stability and a clear mission. But Cadillac does have something working in their favor, a clean slate. No old factory layout, no legacy workflows, no outdated systems. They can build a modern F1 operation from the ground up using fresh infrastructure and unified tools. So, yes, the technical mountain ahead is steep, but Cadillac isn't climbing it without gear. They're climbing it with a company that knows electrification, drivers who know winning machinery, and a blank canvas that lets them build smart from day one. And that leads directly to their next challenge. Building a Formula One car is one challenge. Building the team behind it is an entirely different kind of mountain. A modern F1 operation isn't just a collection of smart engineers. It's an ecosystem of 800 to 1,200 specialists working in sync. And for a brand new entrant, the real test is getting aero, chassis, operations, strategy, and race day execution to think and act like one brain instead of 5 separate departments. But this is where Cadillac has a surprising advantage. They've already put together one of the most experienced technical leadership groups of any new team in decades. Team principal Graeme Lowdon has actually run a startup F1 team before. Nick Chester, the chief technical officer, brings years of Enstone experience. Rob White oversees operations after a long career leading Renault's engine program. And with Pat Simons serving as an executive engineering consultant, Cadillac has genuine Formula One wisdom baked into its foundation. Their driver lineup adds another layer of stability. Sergio Pérez and Valtteri Bottas bring over 500 Grand Prix starts between them, along with deep experience inside championship-winning organizations. Their development feedback alone is worth gold to a new team. And Cadillac's long-term American pipeline, starting with test driver Colton Herta, shows they're building toward a future, not just a debut season. Infrastructure matters too, and Cadillac didn't cut corners. The team will operate globally, with a new headquarters in Fishers, Indiana, a power unit base in North Carolina, GM's technical center in Warren, Michigan, and a race operations and chassis base in Silverstone. Plus access to Toyota's world-class wind tunnel in Cologne. This is an unusually strong toolkit for a team entering from scratch. Of course, none of this guarantees instant cohesion. Chemistry in Formula One is forged during sleepless nights after bad practice sessions, in 72-hour rebuilds, and in the quiet resilience that forms when a team decides failure isn't acceptable. But Cadillac has given itself every possible chance. Experienced leadership, veteran drivers, strong facilities, and a clear blueprint. And that's why it's easy to root for them. As if Cadillac didn't already have enough to deal with, there's one more obstacle lurking in the background. One that shapes Formula One more than any regulation or wind tunnel test. The politics. And Cadillac learned that before they ever turned a wheel. Their original entry with Andretti Global passed the FIA's evaluation, but was rejected by Formula One management. Not because the project lacked potential, but because the paddock didn't want another team splitting prize money, shifting alliances, or disturbing the balance of power. Most manufacturers would have taken the hint and walked away. Cadillac didn't. They restructured under TWG Motorsports, recommitted to becoming a full-works engine manufacturer by as early as 2028, agreed to a $450 million anti-dilution fee, more than double the original expansion requirement, and kept pushing until the sport finally approved their place on the 2026 grid. Before Cadillac ever hired a mechanic or mounted a wing, they passed their first political stress test, simply by refusing to be pushed aside. And that early battle is a perfect introduction to how Formula One really works. Behind the public optimism and polished statements lies a paddock shaped by alliances, rivalries, unwritten rules, and quiet negotiations. Every new entry disrupts the flow. Prize money gets redistributed. Supplier relationships shift. Engine partners rethink deals. Teams that spent decades clawing upward don't want someone new showing up with a shortcut. That's why Cadillac will need allies. Genuine ones. Teams willing to vote with them on technical regulations. Teams open to sharing data, supplier networks, or operational philosophies. Teams that don't view an American manufacturer as a threat to their budgets or influence. Navigating that landscape takes ambition and experience. And this is where Cadillac has quietly set themselves up for success. Their driver lineup is fast and politically seasoned. Sergio Pérez and Valtteri Bottas have spent years inside the sport's most powerful organizations, learning where decisions are really made and which relationships matter most. Their presence brings stability and a level of paddock respect most new teams never enjoy. The leadership group reinforces that strength. Figures like Graeme Lowdon, Nick Chester, Rob White, John Tomlinson, and Pat Simons bring decades of collective experience, technical, managerial, and political. They've survived regulation upheavals, budget negotiations, team restructures, and competitive conflicts. They know how Formula One operates behind the scenes, and that institutional memory matters. Politics will always be a minefield. But Cadillac isn't stumbling into Formula One blind. They've already weathered one political showdown, they're backed by people who understand the game, and they've chosen drivers who know how to navigate the sport's unwritten rules. In a championship where surviving the politics is half the battle, Cadillac is entering with far more resilience and credibility than anyone expected, and that alone gives them a fighting chance. Even if Cadillac overcomes every obstacle, funding, engineering, recruitment, and politics, they still face one final and universal pressure: time. Formula One is a sport defined by continuous development. Every race weekend produces data that shapes the next upgrade cycle, which influences next month's design decisions, which ultimately determines the path of next year's car. The teams at the front are fast because they've lived through thousands of hours of testing, mistakes, accidents, and simulations that slowly refined their instincts. Cadillac has to compress that learning curve into a fraction of the time. They must build a car, integrate a new Ferrari-based power unit, establish a team culture, blend American and European engineering philosophies, get two veteran drivers fully aligned, survive the political minefield, and maintain a rapid development cycle, all before their first race weekend even begins. To their credit, Cadillac has already kicked off wind tunnel programs and is reportedly targeting its first on-track running in early 2026, an early head start that shows they're not waiting around for the sport to catch them up. Their first year is almost guaranteed to be painful. It's the reality every modern newcomer has faced. The hybrid era, and now the 2026 regulations, leave no shortcuts. But here's the encouraging truth: pain doesn't mean failure. In Formula One, early struggles are part of the process. What matters is whether a team can absorb those setbacks, learn quickly, and show steady improvement. And Cadillac has reasons to believe they can. With experienced leadership, veteran drivers who know how to guide development, and a global infrastructure built with intention, they're entering this challenge with far more support than most new teams ever receive. Time will test them. But time also rewards teams that commit, adapt, and refuse to bow out early. If Cadillac stays the course, the foundation they're building now could become the difference between surviving in Formula One and eventually thriving in it. So, where does this leave Cadillac? In a difficult, demanding, but absolutely achievable position. They have financial power, brand prestige, experienced leadership, veteran drivers, and a level of ambition American fans haven't seen in decades. But they also face a list of challenges that no press release can magically smooth over. Challenges baked into the DNA of Formula One itself. If Cadillac succeeds, it won't be because they showed up with confidence. It will be because they embraced the frustration and pushed through early setbacks. Because they refused the easy exit and built a culture resilient enough to handle the relentless, expensive grind this sport demands. And the encouraging part is that Cadillac has already shown signs of exactly that mindset: restructuring after rejection, investing heavily in facilities, hiring seasoned talent, and committing long-term to becoming a full works team. If they keep doing that, truly commit, truly improve, truly integrate, then yes, this could be the beginning of something historic. The rise of an American team that doesn't just appear in Formula One, but competes in it. And with the foundation Cadillac is building, that future feels more possible than ever. If you want to follow Cadillac's journey from underdog newcomer to potential American contender, hit subscribe. And let's see whether this story becomes the one that changes Formula One.